Hi, I'm Festival Pyro, and today I'm putting my art skills to the test and trying out 6 different tutorials from all around the world to find out which country paints the best eyes. First up, Canada. So Sam Does Arts is actually Canadian, and seeing as he has a video on how to colour eyes, easy mode, beginner friendly, I thought that would be the perfect place to start. And I mean, it was definitely beginner friendly. He starts out with the white part of the eye, which if you're following along with this is usually more of a slightly orange or pink grey kind of colour. We then add in some shading because it's a sphere, a brown circle for the pupil, then we start to add in more details and stylization. And as I do that, I'm going to take a moment to talk about how I'm going to rate these. I think that when it comes to these tutorials, the most important thing to rate them on is their difficulty, as well as how well the end results turned out. It would probably also be a good idea to use the same colours, same brushes, same art programs for each of these, just to keep things consistent and fair, you know? But life isn't fair, and neither is this rating system. I don't really know where I went wrong with this eye, but comparing it to Sam's, it just looks a lot more dull and flat. I think that for me, this tutorial was just too simple, and I'm hoping that maybe if the tutorials are harder, the end results will turn out better too. So was the tutorial hard to follow? Nope, it was easy. What would I rate out of 5? I'd give it 1 star. Sorry, Sam. Next up, Argentina. The tutorial we're going to be following for this one is by Flash OD. Now, I do want to say that most of these eyes took me anywhere between an hour and a half to do to 2 hours. So if you're trying to follow along with me, please don't feel the need to get yours done in the minute or two that they're on the screen. I will have all the original tutorials linked in the description, so you can go check those out and take your time with your own drawings. Now that I had the basic eye shape drawn, I went in on the layer underneath and added a mid-brown colour for the skin, and then went over the sketch with a darker colour because I wanted the lines to be a bit thicker and more defined. Then I went back to the colour layer and added in the other base colours. I honestly struggled quite a bit with this tutorial, not only because it was in a language that I don't understand, but also because I was using a program I'm not entirely used to just yet, and also because she does pretty much all her painting on just one layer, which is another thing that I'm not used to. I did download 2 of the brushes that she uses, and they came in handy for pretty much all the eyes I did, so if I remember, I will link them in the description so you can go check them out too. The way Flasho paints her eyes gives them so much depth, and they're so damn pretty, but I don't think I was able to capture that at all. By the time I got to adding in these shapes within the eyes, I'd already spent like an hour on them and just didn't have the energy to paint a whole scene. In her tutorial, she does mention that she will sometimes just use hearts for this, so that's what I tried, but I don't think it came out anywhere as good as her. Overall, this tutorial was somewhat difficult, but I think the language barrier and the fact that I wasn't used to the brushes was what made it more difficult. In terms of how it turned out, I don't really like it, but I do think it's better than the previous one, so I will give it 3 stars for now. Moving over to a different part of the world, we have the Netherlands, my favourite country. I tried looking for tutorials on YouTube in 5 European languages and couldn't find any, so eventually I just went on Google and that's where I found this one. To start, draw an eye shape. Mine was pretty messy, but it's not going to be in the final painting, so that doesn't really matter too much. Starting out, I did expect it to be incredibly difficult, seeing as it wasn't really all that stylized and we were instead trying to recreate a real eye, but it turned out a lot easier than I had expected. Next, we add the base colors and blend them in. The tutorial specifies that you should blend the colors, not mix them, but I had no idea what that meant, so I just did my best to make my eyes look like what theirs did. The next step is to make the crease of the eyelid and the edges around the eye more prominent, which is supposedly meant to make it clearer as to what still needs to be done, but that didn't really work for me. Maybe it works for you. My shadows and skin were looking pretty streaky at this point and nowhere near as soft as theirs was, so I tried to soften it up a bit, but seeing as I didn't really know what I was doing, I moved on to the actual eye. For this, we're going to start with a solid colour. I chose a greenish, bluish, grey sort of thing, and after drawing a circle, I added a few streaks of other colours, as well as the pupil and a white shape for the highlight. I added in a few smaller details like the ones in the photo, and then to finish the eye, it of course needed some eyelashes, which I used Mark Brunet's hairbrush for. As a final step, the reference image they were using had glitter on the eyelid, and I tried to recreate that in the same way they did, but I kind of feel like it just looks like a bunch of different coloured splodges, aka not very good. The tutorial ended up being pretty simple. I think it would have been nice if it went into more detail about what exactly they were doing so that I could better understand how to replicate it, but I do think that the eye turned out pretty good. It doesn't look as realistic nor as smooth as theirs, but I still think it looks pretty okay, so I will give it 4 stars. Back to the Americas we go with a tutorial from Brazil. This tutorial was literally the definition of this meme. It's by Tarcísio Sampaio, and I'm pretty sure that it was the longest out of all of the tutorials. We start with a rough eye shape, then add in the base color for the skin, some reddish shading, a light grey for the eye, and some brown for the eyebrow. After that, we're meant to add in more colors, but he doesn't really explain what those colors are meant to be or why, so I just did my best to copy the colors he was using, placing them in roughly the same spots. After all the shadows and highlights were placed, I colored the sketch red, but I didn't realize what I probably should have have, which is that it's best to leave the pupil and eye lines black because it looks better and helps further down the line. Then he just says to blend and render to get rid of the mess and make the eye look more unified. I did my best to do that, but I didn't really know what that meant or how well it was going to go, but you know, I tried. Something that he did during this blending stage that I did like was taking the pink from the little like inner eye bit and blending that into the sclera. I think it adds a nice level of depth, so I did replicate it. Some people who are a bit more advanced might say that we're painting the bounce light, but I have no idea what that is and I just thought it looked good. Continuing on, we painted the pupil and then went over the skin again, as well as the eyebrows this time, adding more depth to the folds and structure. As I have said, I had no idea what I was doing, and my only real aim here was to come out of this with something that looked half decent. I do like the way I painted the eyebrow though. I took some of the surrounding skin colors and kind of incorporated them into the brow with little wisps. I think that it helps to make the whole thing look more like hair rather than just like a brown line. Overall, this eye took me 2 hours to do. The tutorial was pretty difficult, but I am really happy with how it turned out. So far, I do think this is my favorite out of all of them, and I'm gonna give it 4.75 stars because with the amount of effort I put into it, I definitely think it was worth it. Just loses those extra points because I am never doing this again. Next up, Korea. This was the first tutorial that I got when I typed in draw an eye in Korean into YouTube, and honestly, in terms of how simple and easy it was to follow, this is definitely gonna be number 2. Essentially, all we need to do for this eye is draw a diamond, add a grey colour for the white of the eye, blend out the lines a bit, paint the pupil, and there we go, we have an eye. It is a bit more complex than that in practice, especially if you want to add colour, but generally it is still nice and easy. And I think I would recommend this one along with the next and final one to anyone who wants to learn how to paint / draw eyes. So I think on this scale of how easy the tutorial was to follow, very easy, and for how it turned out, I think I'll give it 4.5 stars because whilst I think like the final result is on par with the Netherlands, its simplicity edges it over just that extra little bit. Finally, Australia, the land of the Australian Shepherd, my favourite dog breed. So as I mentioned earlier, finding tutorials from specific countries was actually pretty difficult, which is how I ended up with an anime eye as the representative for Australia. Is that unfair? Probably. So Oriday's tutorial was super simple. We start off with a classic anime style eye, I say as someone who's never watched anime, and then add in the core elements. He does say that depending on your art style, this might actually be enough, and I do like the simplicity of it. Personally, I kind of wanted to stop here, but I also wanted to see what the final result would look like, so I did continue on. Next, we add in the shadows, which is where I stopped liking what it looked like. And it is probably on me, but yeah, adding in the other different elements didn't really help with how I perceived it, so then the final step was just to paint in the extra lights and accents. This tutorial is honestly really nice and simple, and whilst I'm not a fan of how it turned out, I would definitely recommend checking it out, especially if you're a beginner who's interested in anime. On a different note, I do like the gradients that I incorporate into this eye, and I think that had I chosen different colors, this could have actually turned out pretty good. So overall, what am I going to rate it? Well, as you can probably guess, very easy tutorial. As for the final result, it's just really not my cup of tea, so I am going to go with just 2 stars. And then for the final result, we have Brazil as our winner, Korea as our number 2, and the Netherlands in 3rd place. These are all of the eyes together. Do let me know in the comments which one of these countries is your favorite. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!